Sheila woke before dawn, the pale light slipping through a single crack in the threadbare curtains. Oh, the small room smelled of cold tile and old blankets. She rubbed her eyes and sat up on the narrow cot that she shared with her grandmother. Floor was cold beneath her bare feet, but she did not ask for a thick rug or extra socks. She learned long ago that wishes did not fill stomachs or fix broken heaters. She rose slowly, careful not to wake her grandmother, and tiptoed to the tiny kitchen. Grandmother Edith slept in a chair by the old stove, bundled in layers of scarves and sweaters. Sheila let out a soft breath and gathered a few crumbs from the countertop, the only remains of yesterday's donated bread. She tore a small piece and offered it to the gentle grandmother, whose tired smile warmed Sheila's heart more than any meal could. Edith's hands shook when she took the bread, and Sheila held her hand for a moment, drawing strength from the soft clasp. After the meager breakfast, Sheila tied her shoes and checked the single strap on her old backpack. Inside were a few notebooks, a beat-up pencil case, and a thin book of poems she had found in a curbside pile. Even a scrap of paper inspired her. She kissed Edith on the cheek and slipped out the door into the chill morning air. The city's streets were empty now, save for a lone garbage truck grinding by, collecting the world's unwanted scraps. Sheila stepped around discarded soda cans and old newspapers, her eyes on the cracked sidewalk. Across town, the school bus would soon rumble along, but Sheila could not afford the fare. She walked the 3 miles every day, often sharing the journey with older boys who jeered at her ragged clothes. She kept her gaze low and her shoulders straight, mind focused on what lay ahead. On the way, she stopped by the small shelter downtown, where volunteers handed out the last bits of fruit or cold cereal. Once she had found a fresh orange that tasted like sunshine. She savored even the simplest gift. At school, Sheila sat in the back row, her notebooks open, but her eyes drifting to the window. The other children wore bright shoes and new backpacks. Sometimes they whispered about weekend trips or birthday parties. Sheila felt a tight knot in her chest, but she did not let it slow her. She loved learning more than anything. Every lesson was a new tool for a better life. She wrote words like hope and strength in her notebook margins, each letter a promise to herself. After classes, Sheila hurried to the local library, a quiet place where she could breathe. The shelves held stories of heroes' tales, of people who rose from nothing. She learned of inventors and artists, of leaders who faced loss, but never gave up. One day she found a self-help book with title words that glowed, "Believe in yourself." She carried it home like a treasure. That night, by the dim light of a single bulb, she read passages aloud to Edith. Even the simplest advice felt like a secret code to change their world. Most days, Sheila took odd jobs, sweeping floors at a small shop, folding laundry at the shelter, running errands for busy people who paid her in coins and smiles. The coins went into an old jar on the windowsill. She counted them every night, imagining the day they would break the jar and buy a warm meal. But her greatest fortune was not in coins. It was in the lessons she learned: kindness in small acts, teamwork in a crowded kitchen, patience in waiting for her turn. At home, the apartment's thin walls offered little warmth. The heater wheezed, like an old man climbing stairs. On cold nights, Grandma and granddaughter huddled close under knitted blankets that Edith had made by hand. Sheila often wondered how her grandmother found the will to knit loops of hope out of thin yarn. When the storm shook their windows, they whispered prayers and shared memories of the days when sunlight felt stronger. Those stories painted their dark nights with soft colors and gentle laughter. Sheila's friends in the neighborhood were few, but their bonds ran deep. There was Marcus, whose mom worked 2 jobs, and Aaliyah, whose father had left long ago. They met in the small park after school and played games that required nothing but imagination. They pretended to be explorers in jungles made of bushes and treasure hunters, searching for lost coins under benches. In those games, Sheila felt free. For a few hours, the world outside their little circle did not matter. She often wrote letters to herself. She called her future self Strong Sheila, and described a life where she had a warm home, good food, and the chance to study anything she wished. She dreamed of a day when she could walk into a bookstore and choose any book she liked without checking its price. On paper, her dreams were bold. She would become a teacher, a writer, or even open a community center. In her heart, she decided nothing could stop her. Deep in her thoughts, Sheila carried a quiet prayer. She did not pray for riches or fame. She prayed for someone to believe in her, just one person who would see her bright eyes and promise, and decide to help. She thought that a single act of faith could light a spark that would grow into a roaring fire. She imagined that spark healing her grandmother's tired smile and inviting hope into every cold corner of their home. At night, when the city settled into hushed whispers, Sheila sat by the window and watched lights flicker in distant buildings. She held her book close and read favorite lines again, letting them soak into her mind like gentle rain. She thought of every hard step she had taken that day, of every tumble she'd survived, and of her small victories, a kind word from a neighbor, a good grade in math, an extra sandwich from the shelter. She counted these not as scraps, but as gifts. Before sleep claimed her, Sheila made a promise. She would not let her world define her. Instead, she would shape her world with her own two hands, with her steady heart and trusting faith. She would keep reading, keep learning, and keep working. She would keep her eyes on tomorrow, even if today felt empty. As she drifted into dreams, she pictured a sunrise bright enough to fill every room with gold. And in that glow, she saw herself standing tall, a small girl with a mighty soul, ready to change her fate. Martin Carrington woke each day to a world of glass and silence. High above the noisy streets that carried Sheila's footsteps, his penthouse apartment gleamed with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Lay in his motorized bed, the soft hum of machines his steady companion. A single window framed a bright city sky, but sunlight did not warm his heart. He could see the people far below hurrying toward work, toward school, toward life, everything he had once taken for granted. Now, he watched from behind tinted glass, unable to join them. A nurse entered without knocking. She checked the monitors that measured his pulse and breathing, wiped the corner of his mouth, and adjusted his blanket. Martin offered a polite nod. He did not speak much these days. When he tried, his voice choked on frustration. After the accident, his body had grown still, but his mind raced faster than ever. Every morning, he wondered if this was punishment or if it was life's final test. He found no answer. Breakfast arrived on a silver tray. Omelette folded around smoked salmon. Toast, lightly buttered. Berries arranged like a painting. His chef prepared these meals to delight his palate, but Martin could taste only memories. Pushed the tray aside and stared at his reflection in the window. The man looking back at him was handsome, impeccably dressed in tailored pajamas, but his eyes held emptiness. He wondered if he would ever laugh from his belly again. Instead, of forcing polite smiles at charity banquets, every day brought another invitation. His calendar overflowed with events: a gala for children's hospitals, a luncheon for arts funding, a private dinner for climate research. Invitations promised noble causes and glittering guests. They whispered his name in admiration, praising his generosity and his rise from nothing to millions. Yet Martin felt a sting each time. He remembered the thrill of closing his first big deal, the rush of adrenaline as he signed contracts. Now, deals were spoken words on video calls. Relationships reduced to faces on a screen. His assistant, a young man named Kyle, hovered politely. In the doorway, Kyle managed every detail of Martin's life, every appointment, every thank you note, every charitable donation. He even chose Martin's outfits, yet Kyle knew little about Martin's inner world. He saw a powerful man confined to a chair, and he treated him that way. Martin envied the nurse, whose hands were warm and caring. Kyle's hands simply clicked keys. One afternoon, Martin received an unusual message on his tablet. It was from a local news blogger who wrote about human interest stories. The headline read, "Street girl begs paralyzed millionaire for miracle. Trade leftovers for hope." Martin tapped the message and saw a grainy photo of a young girl, eyes bright, holding a brown paper bag. She stood outside a building where charity dinners were held. The blogger claimed the girl wanted to give her leftover sandwich for a miracle cure. Martin smirked. He leaned back, studying the girl's determined face. He felt amusement at the thought. What could a sandwich offer him? He knew the price of miracles. He had spent fortunes chasing cures, experimental surgeries, stem cell therapies, hyped potions. None had worked. Every potential breakthrough had fizzled, leaving him more bitter. He tapped like on the post and counted the shares. Loved this kind of story. The poor child, the heartless tycoon. In their minds, the girl would break him, humble him. He welcomed the chance to laugh. That evening, at a fundraiser in a glittering ballroom, Martin rolled in on his sleek wheelchair. Chandeliers reflected off polished floors. Servers in crisp uniforms hovered with trays of odd d'oeuvres, champagne. Flutes chimed in toasts. Martin's entrance caused a hush he had learned to love. He was the star of every show. Cameras flashed as he moved among tables, collecting applause like a performer onto a stage. Beneath the lights, he felt hollow. He watched smiling guests and thought about how easily they praised generosity when money was involved. Few asked why he gave. When someone praised his kindness, he wanted to ask, why does a man give away money instead of making more? But he did not speak. Politeness was a language everyone understood. In the back of the ballroom, he spotted the girl. From the photos, she stood alone, clutching her paper bag. Her clothes were patched but clean. Her eyes burned courage. She waited as if she knew she would be granted an audience. Martin admired that. He felt more curious than amused now. He watched her steady gaze, and he sensed that this meeting would break his routine. Servers approached with trays of canapes. Martin waved them away. He did not touch their offerings. Just as off-limits as the girl's sandwich, he refused to taste another bite. He felt a pang of envy for her simple hunger. She had a need so clear and honest that it made his own desire for a cure feel selfish. During a lull in the speeches, Martin asked Kyle to bring the girl forward. He wanted to see her up close. Kyle hesitated. Protocol called for invitations. Not surprises then guided the girl through the sea of guests. Whispers followed her. Is that the street kid? She's so small next to him. Some guests sneered, but most watched with polite interest. They expected drama, perhaps. Tears. The girl approached and held out her bag. Martin looked at her, then at the crowd. He thought about refusing her. He imagined the headlines. Tycoon snubs, poor child. But he surprised himself. He smiled. It felt odd, like a memory of better days. He laughed a sound that silenced the room more completely than any announcement. Laughter with no warmth, an echo in a marble hall. The girl did not flinch. She stood firm, though her knuckles turned white around the bag. She offered her sandwich with calm dignity. Martin leaned forward and said, more to the room than to her, "Is this your idea of a miracle, child?" His voice carried a challenge. She met his challenge with steady eyes. "Sir," she said softly, "I have little to give, but I want to trade it for your faith. You have power and money and many people who care for you. I have only this." She opened the bag and revealed a simple sandwich bread, a thin slice of ham, a smear of mustard. She pressed it forward as if offering the world. Martin's laughter faded. He saw the earnestness in her eyes, the steady hope in her voice. The crowd shifted, sensing something profound. In that moment, Martin realized how small his world had shrunk. He had millions, yet no one depended on him for the simplest kindness. Here was a child whose every action carried courage. He took a slow breath and reached for the bag. He felt the weight of her trust. He looked around at the silent faces, guests who expected pity or scorn, and then back at her. He knew he could squelch her spirit with a joke, or he could let something change. He decided he wanted to be changed. He lifted his hand, not to push the bag away, but to accept it. "Thank you," he said, voice soft. The single word felt strange, but honest. The girl relaxed, a hopeful smile lighting her face. Martin unfolded the sandwich and placed it on his lap. Felt ashamed of thinking of it as scraps. To her, it was a gift. He looked the girl in the eyes. "What do you call yourself?" he asked. "Sheila, sir," she said. Well, Sheila, he replied, I will make you a different kind of miracle. He paused, seeing tears gather at the edge of her eyes. I will not give you money tonight. I will give you something more lasting. Sheila swallowed hard. A quiver ran through her. She nodded, unable to speak. Martin cleared his throat. I have a foundation. I fund many things. Want to fund your education, your family's rent, your needs. He gestured for his assistant. Kyle, arrange a meeting tomorrow for me and Miss Sheila. I want to hear her plans. The crowd summoned applause. Sheila stepped back, shielding her face. Martin felt a warmth he had not known in years. He looked at the half-eaten sandwich and realized it no longer mattered. The real trade had begun, not between leftover food and a magic cure, but between two people who found a spark of hope in each other. That night, Martin closed his eyes. In his bed of glass and metal, but his mind buzzed with new purpose. He thought of Sheila's bright eyes, her steady spirit. He thought of his foundation's work and how it often felt empty, wondered if he could learn from her courage. As machines hummed quietly, he drifted towards sleep with a plan forming in his heart to believe again. Just as Sheila had asked him to. The morning sun slipped through the blinds as Sheila woke with a mix of hope and nerves. She dressed quickly in her neatest clothes, the ones her grandmother had patched with loving hands. In her backpack, she packed the self-help book and the poems she loved. She held her breath as she glanced at the clock. Today she would meet the millionaire who had promised to help. Her heart thudded as she tugged her grandmother's hand. Edith sat bundled in scarves, sipping warm tea. When Sheila told her where she was going, Edith's eyes filled with tears of pride. Remember, child, she whispered, you deserve every chance. Sheila nodded and kissed her grandmother's cheek. She slipped out the door into the crisp air, clutching her papers and hope like treasure. On the walk to the foundation office, she passed familiar streets and friends who cheered quietly. She walked taller than ever. Martin Carrington's driver met Sheila at the elegant glass building. The driver, a quiet man with kind eyes, bowed his head as he opened the car door. Sheila felt the weight of his regard and allowed herself a small smile. The lobby glowed with marble floors and bright lights. Volunteers guided her to a comfortable seat beside a water dispenser. She heard hushed voices speak of the young girl and watched their polite faces. A nurse greeted Sheila and showed her to a private room, offering tea and cookies. Sheila accepted a cookie, but set it aside, too nervous to eat. She smoothed her skirt and tried to steady her breath. On the wall hung photos of smiling children and scholarship recipients. Sheila's stomach knotted with wonder. Could she become one of those photos? She closed her eyes and repeated her promise. She would not let fear hold her back. Martin arrived, wheeling himself through tall doors. He wore a crisp suit and a gentle expression that surprised Sheila. He stopped by her chair and smiled. Good morning, Sheila, he said softly. His voice lacked the hollow notes of charity banquets. It felt real. Sheila stood and bowed her head in respect. Good morning, sir, she replied. He gestured to a seat across from hers. Sheila sat, her heart pounding. They talked first about simple things, the weather, the flower garden at the foundation, the teacher who had nominated Sheila for this meeting. Martin listened closely as Sheila explained her school projects. She spoke of her love for books and her dream to teach other children one day. She told him how she collected coins in a jar to buy winter boots, and how she studied late by candlelight. Her voice stayed steady, though her hands trembled. Martin nodded and asked questions about her poems and favorite passages in her self-help book. Sheila grew more confident as she described lines that gave her courage. She read him a short verse about hope being stronger than fear. Martin's eyes softened. He reached into his pocket and handed her a pen engraved with his foundation's name. For your writing, he said. Sheila's eyes widened. She thanked him, her voice catching. The pen felt heavy with promise. After the small room, Martin asked a driver to take them to Sheila's home. Sheila felt her stomach twist and worry. Her apartment was small and cold. But she climbed into the car, determined to show her real life. As they rode through busy streets, Martin peered out the window. He saw children playing in a dusty lot, old men sitting on benches, and colorful murals on crumbling walls. The city looked different from his high tower. They reached Sheila's building, a faded apartment block that leaned against the sky. The paint peeled like old paper. Sheila tugged Martin's sleeve. "Okay," she whispered. Martin wheeled onto the creaking porch and into the narrow hallway lit by a single bulb. Smell of laundry soap and cooking floated in the air. Neighbors peeked as they passed, and Sheila nodded shyly. Martin smiled back, showing respect for her. Her world? At the apartment door, Sheila unlocked the latch and led Martin inside. The room was small, 1 table, 2 chairs, and a cot against the wall. A thin blanket lay folded at the foot of the cot. The heater hissed softly in the corner. Grandma Edith sat knitting, her back straight despite her age. When she saw Martin, she rose unsteadily. "Mr. Carrington," she said, her voice warm. "Welcome to our home." Martin wheeled in beside her. He looked around with gentle eyes. He noticed the worn tablecloth, the single lamp, the stack of books on the shelf. He saw broken tiles on the floor and a small poster of a world map taped to the wall. He heard the ticking of a cheap clock. His heart tightened. Everything in this room spoke of love, but also of need. He turned to Sheila. "Thank you for inviting me," he said. "I want to see how I can help." He asked Edith about the bills, and rent, and if she had any medical needs. Edith explained the old stove needed repair and how winter bills loomed. She spoke of her arthritis pain and of Sheila's tireless work. Martin nodded and made notes on his tablet, his face serious with focus. Then he asked Sheila to show him her schoolwork. She brought out her notebooks and poems. She read lines about dreams taking flight and hopes that glow like lanterns. Martin listened, as if each word was precious. He asked her to explain her favorite math problems and her ideas for a community center. Sheila beamed, feeling seen for the first time. Martin wrote down ideas: scholarship fund, repair grants, mentorship program. After the work, Martin asked to cook dinner together. Sheila's eyes lit up. In the kitchen corner, a small stove and a few pots sat. He rolled to the stove and watched Sheila light the flame. She prepared simple soup with canned vegetables and rice. Martin tried to help, but his hands trembled from years of stillness. Sheila guided his hand to stir. The smoke curled upward, filling the room with warm aroma. They tasted the soup together, and Sheila laughed at his surprised face. The warmth of the meal and the room made Martin feel alive in a new way. He realized that giving meant more than writing checks. It meant sharing a meal, listening, and building trust. He saw how Sheila's strength came from her small victories every day. He thought of his corporate deals and how empty they felt. Here, in this tiny kitchen, he found meaning. Before leaving, Martin leaned close to Edith. "And Sheila and said, I will pay your rent for the next year. I will arrange for the stove to be replaced. I will set up a scholarship for Sheila's education. And I will send a team to fix these walls." Sheila's grandmother wept tears of gratitude. Sheila hugged Martin, who felt tears sting his own eyes. He laughed softly and patted her head. Back in the car, Sheila peered out at the passing city. She held the engraved pen and thought of her dreams suddenly feeling closer. Martin sat quietly, his mind full of plans and hopes he had never known he could feel. He looked at Sheila's photo on his tablet and smiled, thinking that this small girl had given him a miracle too. That night, Martin returned to the penthouse with a lighter heart. He called his assistant and gave new instructions plans for a youth program. Home repairs, grants for families like Sheila's. He felt energy buzzing in him, as if he had found a new purpose. He thought of tomorrow, of more meetings with Sheila, and the families she cared for. He drifted to sleep, dreaming not of cures for his body, but of cures for hearts and communities. And in a small apartment, Sheila lay in bed, the engraved pen on her pillow beside her poems. She held the promise of tomorrow in her hand. She whispered a prayer of thanks, not just for the help, but for the chance to share her world and to change another life as well. Martin woke early, excitement humming through him like electricity. He dressed in simple clothes for the first time in years: jeans, A plain shirt tanned, felt lighter without his usual suit. Today he would join Sheila at the community center. He had visited offices and signed papers, but this was different. He would roll up his sleeves and help build the place where hope would grow. Sheila arrived with her backpack slung over one shoulder, her hair neatly braided and her eyes bright. She carried sketches of the building rooms filled with books, tables for homework, a small kitchen for cooking lessons. The lot was dusty, scattered with broken bricks and bent nails. Martin wheeled himself onto the land, feeling the earth's roughness under his wheels. Sheila smiled and offered her hand. He took it and felt a warmth spread through him. Workers dug foundations as Sheila guided Martin to a cleared spot. She explained that this center would host free classes for children and warm meals for families in need. She spoke with confidence, describing how she once dreamed of a place like this. Martin listened, nodding. He felt proud to fund it, but even prouder to see it come to life. Sheila led him to a pile of wood planks. "Can you help me move these?" she asked. His fingers wrapped around a plank's rough edge. It felt heavy, but he lifted it with care. Sheila balanced the other end. Together they carried it to a stack where workers would cut it for windows. A photographer snapped pictures, but they ignored him. They were not putting on a show. They were building a future. Later, Sheila showed Martin a small garden patch at the site's edge. "We'll grow vegetables here," she said. "Families can pick fresh produce, and children can learn how to plant." Martin knelt beside her and touched the soil. He remembered his own childhood summers, digging in his yard. He felt a pang of loss for the simple joys he had traded for power and wealth. Now he found them again in dirt and seeds. As the day warmed, children from the neighborhood gathered at the fence. They pressed their faces against chain links and waved. Sheila waved back and invited them in. Martin wheeled toward the gate, and the children squealed with delight. They crowded around, asking questions about the building and the man in the wheelchair. Sheila told them his name was Mr. Carrington, and that he believed in them. The children's smiles were wide enough to light the sky. One boy tugged at Sheila's sleeve. "Will we have a library?" he asked. Sheila knelt and looked at him kindly. "Yes," she said, "and you can choose any book you like." The boy's eyes grew large. He raced inside the lot, imagining shelves filled with stories. Martin watched the children run and realized that this day, this moment, was more valuable than any contract. Signing he had ever done. By noon, the workers paused for lunch. Sheila handed out sandwiches just like the one she once offered Martin. Now she gave them fresh bread, cheese, and fruit. Martin helped too, passing out sandwiches from a stack. He noticed how each child accepted the food with gratitude, and he felt his heart swell. He remembered the fear and hunger in Sheila's eyes when she first offered her leftovers, and he saw how far she had come. After lunch, Martin and Sheila sat on a low wall and drank water. Sheila looked around at the building's frame rising against the sky. "I never imagined it would feel so real," she said softly. Martin nodded. "You made it real," he replied. "I just helped pay for it." Sheila shook her head. "You helped me see that people can care," she said. "That someone will believe in me." Martin reached out and squeezed her hand. A project manager approached with a clipboard. He told them about a delay, a permit issue with the city council. The building could not continue until the paper was signed. Sheila's face fell. She stared at the half-built walls as if they might vanish. Martin frowned. He had seen this before: red tape stopping good work. He stood and wheeled toward the manager. He asked pointed questions, used his voice to cut through the bureaucracy. Within minutes, he had made calls, resolved questions, and assured the city officer that the center would serve hundreds of children. The permit issue vanished like fog under sunlight. Sheila watched Martin handle the situation with quiet authority. She felt pride blossom in her chest. She realized he had not just given money, he had given her influence. He had shown her how to speak up, how to use her voice. He had given her more than she had asked for. As afternoon melted into evening, the site buzzed with renewed energy. Workers resumed hammering nails, and the children chased each other around the unfinished walls. Sheila guided Martin to a corner where a small plaque would hang. She read aloud the words etched on it. "This center stands on hope, built by hearts that believe." She looked at Martin and beamed. "I want you to read it first." Martin leaned close to see the plaque. He felt tears prick his eyes. He placed his hand on her shoulder. "Your words are stronger than mine," he said. "Thank you, Sheila." She hugged him lightly. He felt her arms around his chest and realized this was a gift as precious as any check. That night, Martin and Sheila sat in a conference room of the foundation office. Plans lay spread across the table: budgets, staff hires, class schedules. Sheila spoke confidently about hiring teachers who would come from the neighborhood. She suggested programs for art and music, for cooking and computer skills, asked questions, and added ideas of his own. He felt alive in this work. When the meeting ended, Martin wheeled to the window and looked out at the city lights. Sheila stood beside him, her eyes full of dreams. He thought of his past life, the boardrooms, the final trials, the endless deals. Now he saw how empty it had been. His partnership between a paralyzed millionaire and a brave young girl felt like the real work of life. Sheila smiled up at him. "Thank you for believing in me," she said. Martin nodded. He did not laugh or scoff. He simply said, "Thank you for showing me how to believe in others." They parted that night with a promise to meet again at sunrise. Martin felt a peace he had not known in years. He slept soundly, dreaming of saws and hammers, of children's laughter echoing off new walls, and of seeds sprouting green in the garden. Sheila lay under her thin blanket with the engraved pen on her chest. She thought of today, the day she helped build something for hundreds of children. She whispered a prayer that every kid who came here would feel the same courage she felt. She closed her eyes and fell into dreams of bright rooms filled with books and young faces reading stories aloud. The next morning, both rose eager to return. The permit was in hand, the foundation was strong, and the center was growing faster than either had dared imagine. Challenges remained: funding for staff, scheduling volunteers, keeping the garden alive, but Sheila and Martin felt ready. They had each other's trust and a shared purpose. Together, they would finish this building and fill every corner with hope. And they knew that when the doors finally opened, the community would walk in, carrying dreams, much like Sheila's dreams, that would now have room to grow. The grand opening arrived on a bright spring morning. Sunlight filled the new building's tall windows, making the fresh paint glow. Families gathered in the courtyard, children laughing and chasing each other among flower beds. Sheila stood beside Martin as a ribbon stretched between two posts. She felt her heart beat fast, but it was the good kind of excitement. Together, they cut the ribbon, and a cheer rose up that echoed down the street. The doors swung open, and people streamed inside to see the library shelves, the study rooms, and the small kitchen where hot meals would be served. Sheila watched faces light up, and she knew this day was the start of something big. Inside the main hall, tables stood ready with books stacked in neat piles. Volunteers guided children to reading corners that felt like cozy caves, with cushions on the floor and low shelves within reach. Every few minutes, a child ran by with a book clutched to their chest, and the volunteers smiled as they followed. Behind, in the art room, easels held canvases already splashed with bright paint. The smell of fresh coffee from the kitchenette mixed with the scent of paper and crayons. Sheila moved from room to room, showing visitors around and listening to their questions. She felt proud and a little shy as people praised her work. But each kind word filled her more than any gift ever could. Martin wheeled himself into the new library, where a small group of children sat on a colorful rug. One by one, they read aloud from picture books. Martin listened as a shy boy named Carlos stumbled over a word, then found it when he tried again. A wave of warmth swept over Martin. Years of boardrooms and speeches could never match this feeling. He realized he had poured money into many causes before, but none had touched him like this. Here he saw hope turning into action, and he knew he would never go back to the old way of doing things. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small stack of bookmarks he had printed with the center's logo. One by one, he handed them. To the children, who accepted them with broad grins, after the tour, Martin and Sheila sat together at a low table in the kitchen. A volunteer poured them cups of warm tea and handed them small plates of cookies. Sunlight filtered through the window as they talked about what came next. Sheila told Martin about inviting more writers, more teachers, and even musicians to lead workshops. Martin nodded and shared his plan to reach out to other donors to show them how a small gift could change a child's life. He realized he did not need grand speeches or fancy envelopes. He needed honest stories like Sheila's, she told him. Her own story in simple words, how she once carried a single sandwich to trade for a miracle, and how that exchange had shaped everything. Martin reached out and squeezed her hand, and she felt his faith deepen. As weeks turned into months, the center took on its own life. After-school clubs formed, from chess to cooking, and weekends filled with family events. Sheila led a poetry circle where children wrote lines about their dreams and shared them with each other. One afternoon, she read her own poem about courage and hope. Martin listened from his front row seat, tears shining in his eyes. When she finished, the room burst into applause. She blushed and looked at Martin, who stood to clap louder than anyone. He caught her eye and mouthed, "You did this?" Sheila nodded, and in that moment she felt a calm pride settle over her. Around the same time, Martin began the experimental therapy he had funded for himself. After years of feeling nothing below his waist, he noticed a faint buzzing in his legs. One morning, felt like pins and needles at first, but each day it grew stronger. He learned to wiggle his toes, then flex his ankles. A physiotherapist guided him through simple exercises, and soon he could stand with a walker's help. The first time he did it, he called Sheila immediately. She came running into his apartment, eyes wide, and found him trembling but upright. They hugged, and Martin felt tears warm his cheeks. He said softly, "You showed me to believe in miracles." Sheila smiled through her own tears and whispered, "You gave me mine back." Sheila's own life changed too. With Martin's scholarship, she finished high school at the top of her class. She received letters of acceptance from several colleges and decided to study education. Her grandmother's health improved when the stove was replaced, and the rent was paid for another year. Edith attended evening classes at the center, learning about local history and art. Together, grandmother and granddaughter walked the hallways where their dreams once felt so far away. Sheila kept the engraved pen on her desk, a reminder of how far she had come. She filled notebooks with lesson plans and ideas for her future classroom. Martin and Sheila remained partners in the foundation's work. They met every week to discuss new projects: a mobile library van, a nutrition program, scholarships for older students. Martin learned to listen first and decide later, a skill he never knew he needed. Sheila learned to ask for what she needed and to trust that people could be kind. They found that they balanced each other, his experience and resources with her energy and heart. Together, they visited communities beyond the city, bringing the model of their center to places where hope felt scarce. Every new site began with a story, a child trading a leftover sandwich for a miracle. On a warm evening, several years after the first meeting, Martin and Sheila stood together at a gala held back in Martin's old skyscraper ballroom. This time, they did not need cameras or speeches. The guests had come because they believed in the work. Children from the center greeted them at the door, offering flowers instead of canapes. Martin laughed as a boy slipped a bloom into his lapel. Sheila watched, her heart full. She spoke quietly to Martin. "Look at all this." He nodded and squeezed her hand. "Look what you began," he said. "We began." The story of the poor black girl and the paralyzed millionaire became more than a headline. It became a story of change, how two very different lives can meet and transform each other. Sheila grew into a teacher who helped young students find their voices. Martin became more than a donor. He became a friend, a guide, and a living example of what it means to believe in someone. When people asked how it all started, they told the simple truth: one girl offered a sandwich, and one man offered his belief. From that humble trade, a community found new life, and two souls discovered miracles in each other.